What is happening with these big Dragon Quest games from Square Enix? This is something that a lot of you guys have been asking me about. Yes, we've got awesome reveals like Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. We've got Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. We've got Star Ocean. We've got Deca Police. We've got Fantasy Life. We've got all of these cool RPGs dropping from world-class Japanese developers. But what is happening with the big Dragon Quest games that are highly anticipated from Nintendo fans and people around the world? And that is with Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake and Dragon Quest XII. And I want to talk about both of those and my theory on what I think could happen. Now, I've discussed this before, but I wanted to go a little bit more into detail based on some things that I've heard online, in addition to just my own thoughts that I've wanted to talk about for a while, but I wasn't quite sure about. But before we get into any of that, what's good, everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another video. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, and click that notification bell to get my RPG and Nintendo Switch content first. And I'm sorry if my voice is a little bit out of sync here. I was yelling at my 49ers, even though they got the dub this past week against the Rams. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump right into it here, guys. And I want to talk about Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake and Dragon Quest XII. These games are missing in action, and nobody knows where they are, and people are wondering why Square Enix has not revealed them. We have no indication that they are going to be at Tokyo Game Show. We have no indication that they're going to be at some type of future Nintendo Direct, if there even is one. They weren't at the previous Nintendo Direct. They weren't at the State of Play. People felt that, hey, they could be at the State of Play because Sony did state that they wanted to have their world-class third-party partners with games. So we're thinking, hey, that's a good place. They had Final Fantasy, but there was no Dragon Quest. Now, we've heard a little bit about this game, how they were having trouble with staffing and things like that, but that's all major games. You hire people, you kind of have to really work hard. That's every single major game. But it almost seems strange, as if there's something else that is making sure that Square Enix doesn't show Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake and Dragon Quest XII. Now, some people are saying, hey, have they forgot about it? Of course they haven't. Dragon Quest is one of the core pillar franchises at Square Enix and a huge multi-million-dollar franchise. They have not forgot about something that's going to make them a ton of money. So that's not it. But the biggest thing with this, because they haven't talked about these games in years, as in there's been no actual new footage in years for both of these titles. They've talked about it briefly, saying, hey, I hope we can show something soon, but that's never came into fruition. Even when they stated, I think a year or two ago, I hope we can show more soon. So my theory with this, and this is something that I saw online from my man Stealth, I think that this is very possible that both Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake and Dragon Quest XII are being held for Nintendo Switch 2 reveals, or at least dual launches, or they want to announce the games, or at least re-announce them or put them out there when Nintendo has their Nintendo Switch 2 announced, or they could be at a press conference with Nintendo. Now, why do I say this? Well, there is a lot, and I mean a lot, of history of Nintendo and Square Enix working together to get Dragon Quest as a big reveal, or a first reveal for their new systems. This goes all the way back to the Nintendo Wii. The Nintendo Wii with Dragon Quest X saying, hey, it's gonna be on this system. They didn't have much to talk about, but they said it's gonna be on this system. And then you look at the Wii U, porting that game over with Dragon Quest X as well. Then if you look at what they did with the DS and Nintendo's involvement with Dragon Quest IX, and if you look at what happened with Dragon Quest XI, as they made a Nintendo 3DS version of the game, and even with the Nintendo Switch, they said, hey, new Dragon Quest, it's gonna be on the Nintendo Switch. It's one of the first, if not the first, Nintendo NX at that time, but of course Nintendo Switch game that was announced. So I do think that they want to do it maybe a little bit different this time, to where when they do actually re-reveal it and they show some footage, it's going to be at a Nintendo presentation for this next gen Nintendo Switch. Maybe it's going to be a cross-gen as well. I'm thinking that they're probably going to want to put this on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, PC, Nintendo Switch, and Nintendo Switch 2. They were really cognizant on having a 3DS version of the game for Dragon Quest XI, despite that being a completely different game than the PlayStation 4 version when it comes to tech. When it comes to content in game, it was the same for the most part, with some separate things that the 3DS got and some separate things for the PlayStation 4 version when it comes down to it. But overall, the plots and the characters were the same at its core. And then later, that content came over from the Nintendo 3DS to the consoles with Dragon Quest XI-S on the Nintendo Switch, then later to Xbox and to PlayStation. So I do think that Dragon Quest and Nintendo have such a good, I would say, historical relationship that this is probably something that's going to happen. And I'm guessing that this is the main reason why that they are holding on to Dragon Quest, because it makes absolutely zero sense at this point to not have another trailer for an incredible looking HD-2D remake game. And Dragon Quest XII, a game now at this point that's been in development for a number of years, and if you look at it, they made a ton of money with Dragon Quest XI-S on Nintendo platforms. I think they sold over 1 million units plus in Japan alone on the Nintendo 3DS. At the time that the 3DS was pretty much on its way out, sales were declining. The 3DS was not at the height of its popularity, and it still put up incredible numbers. And then even 2 years later in 2019, with Dragon Quest XI-S on the Switch, those put up incredible numbers for the fact that the game was years late as a port, but it was a really well done, recreated version for the Switch itself. It actually wasn't a port of the PlayStation 4 version. It was a version created specifically for the Nintendo Switch, which is why when they ported the game over to Xbox and PlayStation, the graphics were actually reduced from the PlayStation 4 version of the game, because they used the Switch base code for that port, because ultimately it's a better game because of the music and because of all the stuff that was added in. The graphics just didn't look as nice, but it's very interesting that they are willing to go that far for that type of game. That's something that many third-party developers are not willing to do. We pretty much haven't seen that from a major AAA game at all, with the exception of like Monster Hunter Rise, but once again, that's not a same game from somewhere else. That's a game built specifically for the Switch. But if you're talking about third-party big titles, AAA games, there aren't many specifically built games like that for the Switch from third-party developers, just considering all the money they're spending on Xbox and PlayStation, just how much it costs to get these teams together to make these large type of games. So I think it's very interesting that they went through all of that, that doesn't have some type of effect, especially when you start counting in the revenue that's coming in. A large portion of that revenue when it comes to Dragon Quest is from Nintendo platforms, whether it's spin-offs like we're seeing with the Nintendo Switch here with the new Dragon Quest Monsters game, or it's just stuff like Dragon Quest Treasures or classic games or anything like that. And if you also look at it from this perspective, and I know that Square Enix sees it, they see it on the Final Fantasy side, and you're seeing it with the seismic shift in sales. If you don't think these developers and these publishers are looking at what's happening in Japan, because that's really important when it comes to Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest is still a blockbuster, as in shut down the day, take a day off to play this game when it launches. You've got to look at the dynamics and what's going on in Japan when talking about this game. At the time that Dragon Quest XI launched on the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo 3DS, Sony still had somewhat of a foothold in Japan. The Switch was just really kind of taking off. 3DS was still kind of there, and most of the time you would see the PlayStation 4 do pretty well in these sales when it comes to a home console, with the 3DS usually being at the top but sometimes below it. Those dynamics has completely been eradicated. While the PlayStation does well in Japan, it seems like there's so much scalping going on because these software sales are near non-existent on the PlayStation 5 system. Xbox obviously has no real foothold when it comes to software sales or hardware sales in Japan. So launching a big Dragon Quest game right now with the ecosystem that's going on in Japan, it might be catastrophic to your bottom line if you don't have a Switch and Switch 2 version, if you're looking to have everything at the same time and avoid what happened with Dragon Quest XI and having to launch it 2 years later on the Nintendo Switch because of when the system launched in comparison to when they were developing the game and the updates to Unreal Engine 4. So something tells me that Square Enix is absolutely looking at that and seeing how essentially no software rates in Japan. I mean, yeah, you'll have the flash here and there, but even big games like Final Fantasy 16, they'll be up there at the top and then be eradicated from the top 30 in a number of weeks. Software is just not selling on PlayStation 5 or PlayStation 4 like it used to sell back in 2017. It's just not there anymore. So I think it might be catastrophic to launch it at this point or to talk about it more if you're planning to have a worldwide release and have it on everything in order to maximize your revenue and your initial impact. Now, this could all blow up in my face and I could be completely wrong at the end of the day, but I think that there's something to what I'm saying here based off of the history with the Wii, the Wii U, the 3DS, the Nintendo Switch in terms of Dragon Quest and that franchise, and more importantly, announcements of or saying, hey, this Dragon Quest game is going to be on the new Nintendo system. There is a dedicated history of that happening. So I think it's very much possible here. We're going to have to wait and see, but it just seems incredibly strange that Square Enix hasn't said a word, and it doesn't seem like anything is coming this year. Now, there could be some type of special Dragon Quest event like we got a number of years ago where they just have it and they have Yuji Horii there and he's talking and then they discuss the new game and the elements, and what I'm saying is wrong, but I think at the end of the day, you have to look at what's going on in Japan and how the domination of the Switch, despite it being 6 going on its 7th year, and the software sales, which is the most important here. You can sell 50,000 PlayStation 5s, but if software isn't selling like that and isn't staying there at the top of the boards, and if they're looking at games like Final Fantasy and other big PlayStation 5 games that came out and essentially were moved off the board very quickly or lasted about a month compared to the software that's dominating the charts on the Nintendo Switch, you have to rethink what you want to do, especially if you're going to support that next system from Nintendo, or if that system is going to be a huge launch for you or a huge launch or boon to the game. Because imagine this, guys, imagine launching in Japan Switch 2 and Dragon Quest 12. That to me seems super exciting, probably more exciting for Japanese owners than picking it up on a normal Switch or picking it up on a PlayStation 5. But if you can launch it with the Nintendo Switch 2 and Dragon Quest in that first launch window and have like a bundle with it, that right there is going to get you a lot of sales and excited people. You can really maximize your profits, but we're going to have to wait and see what they do. Like I said, this could all blow up in my face. I just don't know, but I've been thinking. I saw what my man Stealth said, and these are things that I've been thinking as well in terms of why haven't we seen this game? So we're gonna have to wait and see how it all turns out. We'll see what happens at Tokyo Game Show and everything. So what are your thoughts on this, guys, when it comes to Dragon Quest? When do you think they're gonna show it off? You think they can show it off at Tokyo Game Show? I'm not sure if it's gonna happen there. You think there's gonna be some more rumors coming up? You think early next year? You think maybe late this year? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out our other videos on Dragon Quest and more right here. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you for the next one. Peace.